Welcome to Suicide Undone. This is Linda Unaland. My guest today is Kim Wolfe, who is an advanced certified grief recovery specialist and bereavement coach. She's worked with bereaved families for 25 years, and during this time in the industry, she has seen an array of causes of death, including suicide. At age 29, her father committed suicide, and the advice she was given wasn't working to help her heal from his death. Kim, I want to welcome you. Thank you so much for being here. I want to ask you, what age were you when you were diagnosed with grief?
I was four.
That is so young. What factors contributed to that? What was that? How old were you when your father committed suicide?
I was 29.
Okay, so it's much later.
Yeah.
Tell us about the grief that you experienced and how did you and your family cope with it?
With his death?
When it first started at the age of 4, what factors contributed to the formation of your grief? That's certainly a very young age to experience grief.
It is. So this would be in the latter part of the 60s. Okay, just to give you a time frame on how old I am. I'm old. I think the key, divorce was not as common back then as today, obviously. And sadly, my parents were divorced. And I was a year old when they left New York to come to Texas. But my sisters were all older, and my mother, of course. And what I think the pieces as you process, and it takes years sometimes, but looking back, and knowing what I know now about grief, obviously, I can see where there were many factors in place because my mom was no longer a stay-at-home mom. I was kind of passed around a lot with aunts and neighbors and sisters and whoever would keep me. So when they put me in childcare at 4, I didn't know how to play with kids. I'd never been around kids my age, and I kept wandering off into the school-age children. I get in trouble, and they put me back in my 4-year-old room and tell me, you need to play with this. These are your children. And I think looking back, I think it was just such an array of grief within the home. You had a mom who was divorced. She lost her home. She lost her marriage. She lost everything familiar, coming back to Texas where her roots were, of course. But my sisters, we talk different. Let's face it. Northern has a way of talking. You can tell people from up north, and they got teased, by the Hicks in Texas. And, they were looking for a place to fit in. Where do I fit in? Because they lost their dad. They lost their home. They lost their friends, their schools, their teachers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, everybody they knew was up there. And so the anger of, not understanding, why do I feel this way? I think was the key, and the fear of not fitting in. Fear has a big part of grief. Fear is, to me, is the number one voice that starts talking.
That's so interesting that you say that.
Yeah.
So how did the adults recognize it at all at that time? Did they talk to you?
No, we didn't have what we have today. There were really not many options for grieving people. We were told to be strong, stay busy, here, eat something, you'll feel better, get some rest. Of course, you had the people in my mom's world, you need to go date, you need to replace, you need to da-da-da-da. And so she did, and she ended up with a very abusive man. And alcoholism began to take its toll, on top of a grieving family. So, you look at some of the spiritual aspects that grief can play. I think my mom probably, because of my biological father's infidelity, had that fear of abandonment, and rejection was deep. You start studying about your soul and these, I think we talked about at one point, it's sort of like that little cartoon. You got a devil on one shoulder, a little angel on the other, and this one's always talking. This one's kind of quiet, and but you can hear a small voice, but this one won't shut up, and that's fear. And I think fear can really kind of hook your jaw and lead you into some real dark paths in working with people who struggle with addiction and all kinds of things. You know, you see what happened, and it always goes back to that have a drink, you'll feel better goes in hand with here, eat something, you'll feel better. And I
Right.
think
That's
a lot
always
of,
the easy fix is reaching for that substance, but we know it's almost trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
absolutely. And a lot of it boils down to your belief system, which if you abbreviate it, it turns out to be BS. So I've learned the hard way. I graduated from the school of BS. So the concept of it is you know, like I said, you know, we're told things by people who mean well because they want us to go back to who we were before we got hurt. They see our sadness, they see our maybe our neediness because we need to be heard, we need to be understood. We don't need to be judged or told what to do or how to feel, especially because you know that's one of the rules that I put in place in the groups that I lead is there's no comparing here. I've got people who lost a cat and you have lost a child, and you're going to probably instinctively think, what in the world does her cat have to do with my child? Well, you're right. It has nothing. But to her, that was her child. Her cat was her world. So, you know, let's not compare. Let's love each other where we are and give each other the love and understanding because that's what we all need, you know. So
That's
it's
absolutely right. And so you work with adults as well as children in your bereavement coaching practice. How did the approaches differ in working with children versus working with adults?
children do better with play. I mean, if you play with them in depending on their age, and you know, like if you want to get down to the roots of things, you make a game of it. Like, you know, do you like? Let's just say a little girl's dad died. Okay, and she doesn't. She's maybe 3 or 4. She doesn't know how to process this, and so you ask her. You turn it into a game. Do you like broccoli? No, I don't like broccoli. Do you like puppies? Oh, yes, I love puppies. Do you like pizza? Yeah, I love pizza. Do you like your mommy? Yes, I love my mommy. Do you like your daddy? Oh, and you get that, oh, and then you lead them into letting them feel understood. Do you miss him? Yes. Do you know what happened? He died. You know, and you just kind of work with it. Now, I like working with horses and children a lot because horses just reflect what that child's going through. And I know how to watch a horse reflect in the behaviors. And I can see, you know, sometimes the anger and the frustration is in an older child because I don't work with 3 or 4 year olds, but the older children, you know, they tend to be drawn to a horse who has a similar hurt, that hurt of being abandoned by their owners, being neglected, being abused, you know, being starved. I mean, there's a lot of factors at play because, you know, if mom loses dad, what is she going to want to do? She's going to want to go isolate. She's probably going to numb her feelings with some wine or some romance movies or whatever. And the kids are all just kind of wandering around going, okay, I know dad died, but now where's mom? You know, and it's like they lose both parents for a while. Even through a divorce, it can happen. And so, you know, allowing that child to go in and identify, and then you tell the child about the horse's story. Well, let me tell you about the horse you chose, because you were drawn to that energy field of pain, and I think the two of you would be a great fit. And here's why: you stated you felt, and this happened, and blah blah blah. That horse has gone through a very similar, you know, experience. So sometimes it's very traumatic for both. So that's part of where I think kids do better because they get to lead the horses. They get to love and touch. We do paintings on them. They paint symbols of Indian. We do Native American art on them, and they'll paint these beautiful images on their horse. Like a handprint means I miss your touch. If you put hoof prints down the horse's leg, it means I know that this is my journey. And that horse represents their I guess their carrier. They're going to help them carry the load, so to speak, is how we put it. We pass around a talking stick. They share their stories. And there's a lot of tears. But the children are so beautifully wired to not tell each other how to feel. They just know how to instinctively love and support each other. And they're
That's
much,
a wonderful thing.
much more easier, in all honesty. It's easier to work with them in that setting because they're so innocent.
Mhm. I loved your story about pin the tail on the donkey,
That was
working with the kids. Tell us about that one.
I was working with kids, and one little boy was called a racial slur, and most of the kids in our group didn't know what he was talking about because we don't teach that in our home. And so I had to explain, and it was very sad, and they all were very compassionate toward him. And so I had no pin the tail in the donkey game. And I said, well, we're not gonna let this root. And we talked about the heart, okay, and how the brain plays tapes, and this is something we don't want this to play over and over in our heads as we get older, because it will. And so got to pin the tail on the donkey. And I said, okay, I want everybody to sit down. These are kids ages probably 6 to 10, 11. Okay. 6-year-olds didn't do as well, but the older kids did. And, you know, if anybody labeled you with any racial statements, called you fatty, stupid, dumb, ugly, whatever, I want you to write it on the tail. You don't have to identify who said it, but if you felt something because it was said, that's the key. And I watched these little kids, and it just broke my heart because, you know, they're slumped over, their shoulders are down, their heads are down, they're pinning their little tail on the donkey, and then they turn around and sit down, almost as if it was shame. You could see the shame literally on them. And I thought, oh, and that donkey literally, and this is a group of probably 10, 12 kids. That donkey was covered in tails.
Mm-hmm.
You could barely see his little feet. I mean, in the tips of his ears. But other than that, that donkey was literally covered. I said, okay, go get your tails. Because everybody knew we color coded everything. So they went and got their tails. And I said, flip them over. If it said that you were ugly, you flip it over, and it's important that you write I am in front of it. I am beautiful. I am handsome. If they said you were stupid, you say I am smart. I am intelligent, however you want to word it. But let's leave this donkey better than what he looks now. And so they got their tails and they flipped it and they worked on it, you know, for about 20, 30 minutes. And I said, you can go and put your tails up when you're done. Just put them all up in the same time. And so I watched them all go up, you know, and put their tails on the donkey. And I noticed how, you know, their shoulders were back, their heads were up. You could just see the relief in their physical bodies and on their faces, because they were smiling and they would look at their tails, you know. And I just thought, you know, God, how much does it take to just say something kind and positive? And behaviors are taught.
And sometimes even to oneself, because I come across so many adults and they have all these negative tapes playing in their head. And I try to lead them to something similar in terms of, let's just erase these negative tapes and let's just record over what every negative it could be canceled out by positive. And
Yes.
when you choose to do that routinely, the transformation is amazing.
Well, yeah, because you get caught up in, you know, and I can say this because I've had to do a lot of work to erase those tapes like you're talking about, because my childhood was what I heard from a father figure, so to speak, the alcoholic, was you're worthless, You'll never amount to nothing. These words were edged. Nobody wants you. There were just a lot of things that were said that should have never been said. But you carry it and you hear it on every job interview, every friendship you make. You start hearing and seeing these old tapes playing. And so I had to learn to flip my tail over, so to speak, and reverse it, like you said. And every time little monkey man over here is whispering in my ear, I'm going, no, you don't exist. You be quiet. And I let
One lady I work with, she had a wonderful name. She called her Bitchy Betty. She said, Bitchy Betty sits on my shoulder, and every time she starts, I cut her down at the knees. I just love that.
Yeah, because I think that's part of where we find ourselves in our world that we live in today. I think people are, they've got spiritual wounds. The church has wounded so many people, sadly, with their religious mindsets and the Pharisee mentalities and the judgments, and you're a sinner and this is why you're sinning. It's like, you don't know that. Don't, you're not God. So people have pulled away from the church, sadly. And I think people are on their own journeys right now because I think they do believe in a higher power. I think we all instinctively have something that was in us upon our creation. Then there's a hole there that we try to fill with earthly things and drinks and happiness or whatever. But I think that hole is knocking. There's somebody inside there knocking harder and harder, because I notice on all social media platforms, people are praying. People are talking more about God than they ever have. And I think there's something happening in our world and in our spirit personally. And that's one of the things that it's hard for people when we go through a recovery process on grief, because they hear the words grief and recovery and they think, well, if I recover from this loss, it's probably going to mean I didn't love my special person. I'm like, no, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is goodbye to pain. My stepfather died a long time ago when I was 13. He had a heart attack. But that pain kept talking to me. And so I started doing my grief recovery.
Wonderful.
And I realized they don't talk about God in this book, but this is one of the most spiritual books I've ever, no matter what you believe, or even if you don't, okay, you don't even have to be a believer. This program, I went through therapy. I went through grief share at church. I went through prayer ministry at church. And they all had their little nuggets. Don't get me wrong, but that made me work for it. That book right there made me work for it, and it made me take action toward it. And it wasn't just to sit there and listen to sad stories. I had to motivate. I had to get with it. And what it taught me was I did love my stepfather. There were things about him I did love, and I had to acknowledge that. But I also had to acknowledge the hurt and the pain and the trauma he put us through. And that's what I say goodbye to. That's the recovery
Tell
part.
us a little bit about forgiveness, because so many people struggle with this. They've had people that have hurt them deeply in their past. How important is forgiveness in the recovery process?
Let's start with unforgiveness. Because unforgiveness is I think it starts a lot with expectation. You put expectations on another human being that you have no control over. And as a human, they may fall short. But then what happens with an expectation is it opens the door to resentment. That's the root that's going to take place in here. And then it's going to start playing up here. And then just picture, if you will, a beautiful, beautiful bird somebody caught and threw in a small cage. All that bird could do was go from the perch to the floor, the perch to the floor. He couldn't even fly. That's what unforgiveness feels like. You've made yourself a prisoner of your own making, really. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of why God instructed us to guard our heart, because it can be deceitful. And trust me when I tell you, my heart was full of things that I had no idea was in it. It was full of resentment, bitterness, shame, judgments, unforgiveness, wrath. I mean, wrath. Because anger became my shield. My heart couldn't take any more hurt, so I put up this shield of anger, and I pushed everybody, my family, my friends, my coworkers, anybody. Don't get close to me because I don't want to get hurt anymore. I had a 33-year marriage ending infidelity. I had a kid off in Iraq fighting a war. I had a 15-year-old dog I had to put down. My mother was dying. My mother-in-law died. My sister-in-law died. And this is all within a few months. And I just felt like Job. And I finally cried out to God. And I was mad at God. As a 10-year-old girl, I was like,
Understandable with all that grief all at one time.
that grief finally, and you hear the phrase, if you don't deal with your grief, it's going to deal with you. And it did. It dealt with me. But it took a hurt pocket. As a child, you tuck your little hurts in your pocket. Your fish died. Oh, I'm sad. Okay, well, we replaced that. We got another fish, but it wasn't the same. Your best friend moved away. That goes in a little hurt pocket. But, and that's all great up until you're, anywhere from 18 to 30, really. And then it goes in a backpack. And then in your 30s to your 50s, you turn around, you look behind you, you got a whole U-Haul of unresolved grief, really grief, losses that you never knew how. Nobody told you. You get taught how to get stuff, but you don't ever get taught how to let go. And you trying to let go with all this great advice that doesn't work, and you find yourself trying to paint a room with a screwdriver or a hammer. You're like, this is getting me nowhere. But then you get serious about it and you realize I need to do something and find the right fit. Sometimes it's good therapy. There's nothing wrong with therapy. Sometimes you need medication, just depending on where are you in your head and in your heart. But to me, it's a heart issue. And I don't give out pills. And I tell people that up front. If you're looking for a quick fix, you're not going to find it with me, because we're going to work together for about 6 to 8 weeks. And that's it.
That's an individual, I think, case by case. Sometimes the grief or the depression is so deep that
They need help.
medication has a role, and ideally works hand in hand with therapy. Now, are there different stages of grief from your experience? I know Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about that. What can you tell us about the stages of grief?
I think for me, and it may be different for everybody, I know her intentions were for the dying. These are the stages as a palliative care, hospice, social work. All the work that her life's work went into helping and assisting people and families who were terminal. And so you find out, okay, I've got cancer, I've got something that's terminal. Well, the first thing you do is, no, I don't. I'm going to go get a second opinion. And you get a third, and finally you're thinking, okay, denial. I can't deny it. I've had 3 doctors tell me. So, okay. So you sit on that for a while. So you're out of denial. And they don't go in any order. Okay. Sometimes you get mad. Why didn't I go sooner to get this checked? I knew I was hurting. I knew blah, blah, blah. Okay. So you struggle with some anger. Depression will grip you during this, at some point. And you bargain. God, please, if I could live, I promise all, and you fill in blanks all the time. And then you finally get to a place of acceptance, even. And, sometimes you can go back and be mad again, or you can start bargaining, and you're working toward accepting it. And that's for the dying. And it's been twisted. And these people who go into grief groups and stuff like that, they want the griever now to go through the stages of death. And it's like, it's not meant for them. You may experience some of them, yes. You might be angry. You might be depressed. You might, who are you going to bargain with after death? And your goal is still accepting it. You still have to accept it, but you got to heal from what wasn't said, done, what you wish could have had, what you wish could have been more or better or different. All those coulda, woulda, shoulda. We all go through it when we lose somebody. That's the recovery part.
It's a less than perfect life for sure. And part of the process is just acceptance that it's never going to be perfect and there's always going to be regrets.
Yeah.
Now, how long does it take for a person to fully recover from grief, or do they ever fully recover?
I think you're always going to miss. Grief is the process of missing them in your life, their presence, their physical presence, hearing their voice, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's personal for everybody. I just talked to a mom whose son, it's on his death certificate that he committed suicide. I don't think he did. He was intoxicated and his girlfriend broke up with him. And I think he made a desperate cry because he didn't want to be abandoned. He was from a divorced home and everything. And he used alcohol to numb, sadly. And I think what happened in this case, I'm not a doctor, but he threatened it. And then he was expecting her to come back and save him. And he passed out. And he had a news. And his mom found him. And she talked to me yesterday, I think it was yesterday. And she said, it's so bizarre because it's been a year. And that first year, I got through it all. Like you said, the birthdays, the holidays, the special births that we've had in our family since he's gone and things like that. She said, but this is the second year and it's worse. Why? And I said, well, maybe it's because I think during that first year, if God didn't do something in our minds or in our bodies or something, however he created us to feel, I think he has a way of numbing us in his own loving way without alcohol or pills or anything. I mean, don't you understand when you find out, you kind of go in shock? What? It's not really denial, but it's like, you're like, what? Oh, this can't be. And your brain just goes like a pinball machine. And then slowly it starts to, that feeling, that numbing agent, I don't know what to call it, but it begins to wear off. And the first year, yeah, you look at the calendar and you think, oh, his birthday's coming up. Oh, his death date's coming up. Oh my God, Christmas and the holidays and Valentine's, all these things are coming up. And you brace yourself. But you're still kind of numb. But I think the second year, it's all wore off. And you realize, that's what I told her. I said, I think what you're going through right now this isn't a bad dream. The first year felt like a nightmare. This didn't really happen. I said, I think what you're experiencing is, I'm not going to wake up from this. This really happened. She goes, yeah, I believe that. I believe that. That makes sense. So.
And I imagine certain griefs are more complicated than others. Certainly a grief from a suicide is totally different than a grief from a death that happens naturally. There's so many questions that are left.
There are a lot of questions because you question yourself. How come I didn't see the signs? Why didn't they say something? How could they do this? Who in their right mind would follow through with this? They had so much to live for, and this battle goes on. And then you got two of these little bitch and Betties. This one flew off somehow. I don't know where he went, but in the meantime,
Bitch and Betty on steroids.
Yes, when you realize exactly, oh my God, you attend the funeral, you see it, then you see it. Or maybe you don't see their body, but you see their celebration of life or whatever, and you think, so this is real, and you sit there and you're in this place, but you're somewhere else. For a long time, you're somewhere else. And it creates a living hell. Trust me, a living hell for the people who are trying to figure out, why did you do that?
Yeah,
You
I
can,
can only imagine. Yeah, now in the jail where I work, we see examples of grief all the time. And some cases are just, it's really difficult to work with people when they come to jail. For example, what do you say to the IT guy who 3 o'clock in the morning in a fit of rage strangles his wife to death? And now the kids are left without a mother and a father because he's looking at 25 to life. Or the woman who, through some delusional belief, basically, who's losing a custody battle, has the idea that she's going to kill the child and commit suicide and reunite in heaven. The level of grief is so profound. It's one thing to grieve in the community where you have access to supports and distractions. But when you come to jail and you're isolated in a cell and all you have are the four walls and your thoughts, it's so hard to really come back from that. But yet I've seen it happen. And this is really a testament to that life force and that will to continue going on. Now, this morning I came across this. It's like a little paragraph that I just want to read it because this really touched me in how true this is. So basically it says life is a constant series of dying and coming back to life. You die a little every time you get hurt. You die a little every time you experience loss. You die a little time. You die a little every time you hit rock bottom. You are reborn every time you receive healing. You are reborn every time you pick yourself back up. You are reborn every time you have a breakthrough. There's always that moment when all of a sudden you realize that you come alive again. Life will take you to death's door, but it will give you the chance to rebirth yourself. When you feel like it's the end of the world and you are dying inside, remember that it won't kill you. You don't have to run away. You can let it transform you. Death and rebirth go hand in hand. One can't exist without the other. You have no choice but to rise from the ashes because that's life. And this is written by M. Chase. So
wow,
I'm sure you see that time and again. It is really a choice of choosing life
it
and
is.
continuing, even in the midst of all the crazy things that happen in life. And it'd be wonderful if life was a smooth ride, but I think grief is something that touches every single person at some moment in their life, sometimes in big ways and sometimes in small ways.
Mm.
But I think it's the reaction and the decision that's made.
It is. And I know that was reminding me, it took me in my mind, I was going back in time when I was 25 and my sister died in a car wreck. And she struggled with alcoholism and just a lot of little bitchy betties. They were flying all over her head all the time. And I think a lot of the pain from our parents' divorce and just other things that factored in throughout her life. She had been married 3 times herself, and just it's just a lot. And when she died, and we got the call at 3 o'clock in the morning, we were at the hospital, and the doctor came in, and he confirmed it. And I remember going home after her funeral, and I was sitting in the kitchen at the table sipping coffee, and I like to write, I like to journal, and I started writing about this journey, and I was thinking about her death that night, and it was like there were these 3 entities that came and knocked on my door, and I didn't invite them; they weren't expected, but here they were, and they had suitcases, and so I figured they were going to stay a while. So as they entered, I asked, as they walked by me, "Who are you?" And the first one spoke and said, "My name is Fear." The second one spoke and said, "My name is Loss." And the third one that came through said, My name is Change." And so I'm writing all this down in my head. It's weird. So fear was always the first to speak. And he would tell me things like, you're never going to get through this. You know, you're going to end up just like her, blah, blah, blah. And loss basically would whisper, don't listen to him. He's a liar. I'm the reason. I'm the reason he's here. But unless you deal with him first, I can't bring change in to help you through this journey. And change is the key right now. So sit down with fear and get him to silence himself, so I can come and do my job with change. So I battled fear for a long time, and finally the voice was quieted, and then loss jumped over here, and change came in, and change was slow to speak. But change began to show me snapshots of life, because she had a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old, and so now we're in a new home of grieving women all over again, because my mom was there and I had a daughter and a husband, and we spent a lot of time together in that house over grief. And so just looking at her life in general and processing what happened, and how violent that car wreck was. And, that was what loss was showing me, that one, I had no control over another human being. I read Ecclesiastes over and over, especially the part where you have a time to be born and a time to die. It was her time. I was coming into something spiritual, really. And then it was like these little pieces of this puzzle kept coming together, and each day brought a new piece. So you start fitting the puzzles together, and then change began to appear. You got the picture now. And this was one of the scenarios, that was playing out for me. And then one day I kind of got up and I heard another knock on the door. And so I opened it and I looked, and there were 3 more hooded entities, but they were light. They weren't dark, they were light. And I said, and I didn't invite them. I wasn't expecting them. But they came in, and I said, okay, so who are you? And I looked over and I saw Fear, Loss, and Change had packed their bags up, and they were exchanging slight smiles, if you will. And so as the new ones entered, I said, who are you? And they said, I'm faith, I'm hope, and I'm love.
What a wonderful story.
And that really helped me help widows. And I don't know why I'm drawn to widows, but I'm just really drawn to people who've lost a spouse, men or women, widows, widowers. And that's one of the things that I explain to them when we're in a group. I'll just take a puzzle piece, a box of, it's a 300 piece puzzle, and I got 4 people working it, but I don't give them a picture on the front, because, I'm demonstrating something basically. And that's what they asked. Well, what is the puzzle about? So I don't know, find the flat pieces and border it. And I'm going to get up here and talk, and you listen and you work together, but at least try to border it. And I'm going to give you, 15 minutes. And so they usually can get it bordered pretty quick as a team. And, they're trying to look and see where now the border's done. I don't know where this goes. And they're fussing. And I said, okay, stop. So I go get their box studies and I put it in front of them. I said, does it make sense now? And they're like, oh, yeah, okay. And they asked to finish it, and we finished our talk. And I said, the point of that is, right now, where you find yourselves, newly widowed or widowed, you don't have a vision anymore, because they're not here to help piece it. You had a plan. We were supposed to, and you fill in a lot of blanks. This was too soon, whatever. But you still had plans with this person. You weren't ready to say goodbye. But now you got to rebuild your life without them. And I want you to understand how important it is, because biblically speaking, the Bible does say, my people fell from a lack of vision. If you don't have a vision for this new life, this change, this from this loss and you don't quiet that fear down of not being able to fit these pieces together, you're going to wander in this wasteland until you die. Is that what you want? Or do
It's
you,
so important to have that roadmap in life, and that
absolutely.
vision is so important, like you said.
Yeah.
So important. I find in my experience, people that do have a faith, it helps them so much. A lot of times I encounter people who identify with atheism. It's so much harder to, without having that framework, to help them with feelings of grief.
Mhm.
And, when you talked before about people have their time when they are, it's helpful to look at it. There is a master plan. That's what I believe anyway. And when it's someone's time to go, they could be healthy and vibrant, but when it's their time, it's their time. And in a different scenario, you could find someone who's on the verge of dying where the chances seem so dismal.
Mm.
And you hear about that in the near-death experiences. There's so many of them online where they die and they get told, no, it's not your time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having that acceptance that everyone does have a time, it kind of addresses the second guessing. Well, what could I have done? Could I have prevented that? There is, I believe, a master plan. We don't understand it. I saw it, I heard it one time. It was a wonderful analogy about the mother who was doing needlepoint. And the boy, from his vantage point, he looked up and he said, "Oh, Mom, why does that look so ugly?" Because he saw all the knots in the back of the needlepoint. But when she tilted it over, he said, "Oh, that's actually so beautiful. It's perfect." And I think that life could be regarded that way too, that we see the knots and the ugly pieces, but all we have to do is at some point, realize that there is this beautiful master plan where even the imperfections fall beautifully into place. So acceptance, I think, has a huge part to play in recovery.
Oh yeah, and it's like you talked about the needle pointing, and I used the vision of a tapestry. I said, if you put in your mind for a moment, what would be a beautiful tapestry for you? Whether it's floral, whether it's a pattern, a design, just what is it? And I have them close their eyes for a minute, and then I say, do you notice any black threads in that tapestry? And if so, how much? Because some people's tapestries are covered in black and they have just a little pop of color around the borders and then it's black in the middle. But to them, that's a beautiful tapestry. But to me, it's necessary. Those dark threads are necessary because that is where we grow. Sometimes we have to be in the dark to grow. We have to be so engulfed with pain. Sometimes pain comes to motivate us for change.
That's absolutely true. What I'm so amazed by, you see in the YouTube, there's so many life coaches.
Yeah.
And they coach on different subjects, but more often than not, they've been through that dark place in their life, and it's the vision of coming out of hell carrying buckets of water for the rest of us.
Yeah.
In terms of sharing their experience and the tools for healing, and helping someone who's solely lost navigate in a sea of just grief, morbidity, whatever it is.
Well, to me, people ask me, what is bereavement coaching? Or life. I mean, you say the word life coach and it can cover such an array of niche. So I stick in the bereavement coach part on mine. It's more of a development coach, if you will, because what I want to do is I want everybody to choose for themselves what is the best fit, first of all, because not everybody's a good fit. And, I would prefer people go through the grief recovery to acknowledge what's holding them back, because grief will hold you back. Pain holds you in place. It's like a like a bondage. And it's fear at the root of it, actually. So this helps you overcome and look at fear and get you set free. Now, what's your excuse? You've done the work. You ready to rock? You want to rebuild? Let's go. To me, that's the beauty of the whole journey, is looking at the losses you've never dealt with. And I've had people get upset and threaten to leave, and I'm like, it's okay, you're not ready. And I'm not mad about it. Well, you're traumatizing me. You're making me relive. I said, I'm not making you do anything. You're the one who came to me, first of all. I'm trying to show you something, and I don't know where you are spiritually, because we're not talking about God or anything. We're not, but what I see when these memories come up, I see places that are crying to be healed. And that's why you're so upset, because you're traumatized from it. And now you're angry. And believe me, sister, I've been there. I found that shield up. No. I understand. You're not ready.
That's so true. The past always, the past always shows up if they're unhealed wounds. Yesterday, I was texting with someone from the suicide prevention pages in Facebook, and he's so torn up because his girlfriend left him for another man. He's so filled with grief. He has contemplated suicide. And when I asked him about his past, his childhood, and he said, yeah, I was abandoned when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So
huge one right now.
That is a big festering wound. And I think unless you address that, it's gonna keep showing up.
I had them. Yeah. And it was funny because, like I said, there's that hole, there's something bigger than you somewhere. You just maybe don't know it yet. But it waits on you. It's very patient. It's very loving. It's very graceful. Or it was in my case. Because I was out in the field at 10 years old after my stepdad shoved a gun in my mouth and telling God I hate him. Basically, I don't need you. You threw us down here. You kind of said the heck with us. So what the heck with you, pal? And I stormed off. And I prayed to Jesus, because to me, Jesus was different. Jesus was like my brother, but a father figure, I wanted no part of that. And I think that's the principality. That's that thing over here that starts that whispering, that nefarious voice we hear. And it tells you to hate God because of what your earthly father did. And what shocked me was when my pastor asked me one day to define my father in 2 words, my earthly father in 2 words. I said, well, that's easy. I said, he was abusive and abandoning. And his little eyes swelled up with tears. And he said, well, honey, do you realize that's how you view God? I said, well, yes, sir, I do. I had no doubt, no missed the beat. That just blah, blah, there it was. And he said, well, we need to heal that. And we did. And I mean, you talk about boo-hoo. The cleansing of that cry was remarkable. And Jesus was the way to the Father. But he waited for me to have that moment to identify that's what happened. God didn't do that. A man did. 2 men, actually. One abused and one abandoned. And they were linked together, because one was a replacement for the abandoner. And, you had to sit back as an adult and go, wow, I believed a lie. And you feel remorse for that. How could I believe such a lie about my creator and blame him for something these 2 free-willed human beings did? Plus you're carrying shame and guilt and everything that they did. You didn't ask to be treated that way, but you're carrying their shame and but it was just like, it was gone. And I didn't do that. There's no way I could have done that for myself. And that's when my heart surgery began. That's what I call it, my heart surgery. And it's when I got to sit down with the Lord and just, we looked at it. Because it was affecting this. So the tapes that were playing over here had to be erased and replaced. in order for this to heal. Does that make sense? And that's
So
why I tell people, your brain, when you think you're going crazy because you're grieving and you hear all these voices in your head and these scenarios playing off, your head's not broken. It's your heart. Let's move down 12 inches and look in here. And people have a hard time doing that. But that's where you have to go.
And thank goodness that they have you to help them in that healing journey. Thank you for the work that you do.
Yeah, you too as well. I'm going to ask you a question. I know you're interviewing, but what got you into this prison work with suicides and the social work? And I'm just curious.
Well, the prison work, it's funny. It's almost like God answered a prayer for me. I had seen this movie based on a true story. Those are the ones that I absolutely love. And the story was about a young woman who, through a series of bad associations, ended up having to serve a huge amount of time. And I remember feeling such a sense of compassion for her. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, it would be really neat to be working in that setting, to be able to help people such as her. And P.S., I think God worked it out for me. It was just a random thing. I answered an ad. It was very convenient, 10 minutes from my house. The salary was great. And I always give this, before that, I had worked in a senior place, and I was doing home visits for the VNA. My first week working in the jail was not a good week. Those inmates were acting out and throwing all sorts of things. And at the end of the week, I was so depressed and saying, what on earth did I get myself into?
Don't we all?
And then the second week was better, and the third week was even better. And here I am. How many years has it been? Since 1999.
Wow.
And I don't have a single regret. It's been like amazing. I've met so many people in all walks of life, even professionals. Cases I will never forget that have enriched me immensely. The suicide prevention piece in the community is something that inspired this podcast, because in jail, if we come across someone who's suicidal, in the blink of an eye, we put them on suicide watch, where we have a 24/7 system of observation where the correction officer sits in front of their cell and just makes sure that they don't commit suicide. And actually, they're our eyes and ears, because the minute they see a tear before the placement of suicide watch, they always call mental health.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me, in the community, there is no system like this. Yeah, we do have suicide prevention, we do have therapists, but that safety net in an acute situation, short of hospitalization, just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so, like my good friend Sabrina Victoria always says, you know something I don't know, and I know something you don't know. So this podcast creates a forum for people who have been themselves in that dark place. It gives a forum to impart the coping, the tools, the perspective to bring about healing. At least that's my hope. And I love doing these podcasts, even though I've been in clinical social work for 35 years, I always learn something new.
I know. Isn't it amazing?
I'm like really grateful to the people that do the podcast. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, it's interesting how we see a broken society, and we need people in the field, so to speak, to harvest these hurting souls. But yet you have to ask them as well, because I do when I open a group or a one-on-one session. I always ask this question, and I think it's because Jesus asked too. Do you want to be well? Do you want to be well?
Yeah. That I'm so amazed when, again, I go on the suicide prevention pages routinely, and I see so many kind people, so much love in their hearts towards strangers. So yes, definitely there's the professionals, but there's your average Jane and Joe too. The help is amazing, and that the genuine caring and love that they have toward a hurting, grieving human being.
Yes.
It's real. There's a lot of bad people,
Mm,
no doubt, but there's even greater, wonderful,
absolutely.
loving people. And when we surround ourselves with this network, it's
Yes.
it's so much easier.
It's a ministry. I mean, it is. It's a ministry. It's a calling. It's something that, you probably have gone through yourself in order, because that's what I remember when I was going through so much loss. I was crying out to God and I said, why are you taking everything from me? And he explained to me, he said, because I need you to relate. I'm like, what are you talking about? Relate to what?
Yes, thank goodness. So,
It,
Kim, please tell the audience if they want to reach out to you. What's your contact information? What is the best way for them to reach you?
I would lead them to my website, I guess, because it's going to cover a lot of different scenarios in there, and it's real easy. It's Kim Wolfe with the E.net, just kimwolfe.net. But when you open it up, it just kind of lets you see who I am and what we do. And I'm still working on my website. It needs a facelift really bad. It's a little outdated, but um, you know, there's a lot of free downloads. There's a lot of free, like talking about different losses, prenatal care. I remember going to an abortion clinic when I worked in the funeral industry, and the people, they had security guards out there, and they said, "Are you here to protest?" I said, "No, I actually have an appointment." They said, "You get a procedure done?" I said, "No, I'm dropping off some pamphlets about grief," and they're like, "Okay." So another hot topic, I know. And so I get out in the parking lot. They won't let me in, and I'm standing out there, and I'm looking at all these little girls, and they were little girls. I mean, 20, anywhere from, they looked in the range of 14 to maybe 20. They were standing by themselves. I saw a bunch of guys in the car and some girls. But basically they were all alone, and they were holding their tummies, and they had these oppression. I don't know what else to call it. They just looked so oppressed. And I was on the receiving end of taking death calls like that from those mothers who would tell me I'm having a procedure done. They couldn't even find the words to say I'm terminating my pregnancy. So I'd get the call from the nurse after it happened, and she would instruct me, not to bring a bassinet and come in the back and be discreet and don't make a scene. And I thought, this is a very dark place. You felt it. I'm sorry. I felt it. And I thought, and I take the call and I say, did the mom give the baby a name? It's not a baby. It's material waste. It's a, blah, blah. And I said, well, I took a call from her yesterday, and she's asked us obviously to bring her child in our care. So she doesn't look at it as waste, hazardous waste, or whatever you're calling it. That was her child. And so I asked her, can I drop off some pamphlets on postpartum grief? And let me get with my director. So the director did call me, and she was open to it. And so I thought, well, it's a start. Maybe we can start, with that. And so it's mind-boggling to me how everything just finds its way. You know what I mean? You find a way to help somebody who don't even know that this procedure is going to haunt you for the rest of your life. and just to have something to comfort. And that's what the way I'm getting off in the rabbit hole. I'm sorry, but that's the kind of stuff I'm offering for free. It's under the resource tab, and there are downloads that people can just look at. And there's like pet loss and helping children with loss, and tapping into your grief and your journey. There's several books about grief on there, but it's it's free for the taking. You just put your name and email and it'll shoot right to you. So just go to kimwolfe.net and just see if there's something in there that might bring some peace.
Well, Kim, God bless you for the work that you do. I'm sure you've touched so many people. I'd like to remind the audience that if you have found this podcast of value, please subscribe to the channel. And as always, if you are considering suicide, please reach out to a crisis counselor through the hotline at 988. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Take care.